Come with me. A millionaire CEO saw a little girl sleeping at a bus stop. What he did the next day changed their life forever. Snow fell thick and quiet over New York that night, painting the city in a blanket of white. The wind hissed between buildings, carrying with it the kind of cold that seeped through wool and skin straight into the bone. Michael Reynolds, 32, stepped out of a glass tower on Park Avenue, still carrying the weight of a long, tense business meeting. Known as the youngest CEO to dominate Wall Street, he had built his empire on precision, numbers, and complete emotional detachment. Tonight, though, something in him refused the warm luxury car waiting curbside. He waved off his driver and walked, letting the icy air clear his head. He turned down a quiet block near his hotel, snow crunching beneath polished leather shoes, when the flicker of a street lamp caught his eye. A small, lone figure lay curled on a metal bench beneath the faded yellow glow of an old bus stop. He slowed. It was a child. Michael stepped closer, his breath visible in the frigid air. The girl couldn't have been more than 4. She was huddled beneath a tattered coat far too big for her, wearing only a thin cotton dress underneath. Her hair was tangled, cheeks flushed and raw from the cold. Her lips already tinged with blue. She was asleep, or trying to be. Alarm surged through him. Without hesitation, he crouched beside the bench and gently touched her shoulder. "Do you have a home?" he asked softly. "It's freezing out here. Let me take you somewhere warm. Come with me." The little girl stirred. Her eyes blinked open, startlingly clear, wide, and calm. She looked at him with neither fear nor surprise, just quiet trust. "My mommy went to look for dinner," she said, her voice small but steady. "But I'm not scared. You're here now. You're the miracle, right?" Michael froze. That word, miracle, did something to him. She had said it like it was a fact, like it was obvious, like she had been waiting for him. He didn't know what to say. In his world, belief didn't matter, results did, and yet, in this moment, that one word from a little girl, wrapped in frost, shook him deeper than any investor ever had. She sat up a little and reached into the old backpack by her side. From it, she pulled out a crumpled photograph and held it up to him. "This is my mommy," she said. "She said she'd be back before the snow covers my shoes. Can you wait with me until then?" Michael glanced down. Snow had already started to gather on the rubber edges of her sneakers. The sight made something twist in his chest. Without a word, he pulled off his heavy wool coat and gently wrapped it around her small shoulders. She sank into it instantly, like it was a blanket made of clouds. "What's your name?" he asked after a long silence. "Laura," she said, nestling deeper into the warmth. He nodded, unsure what else to say. She looked back down at her feet. "Me and Mommy stay here sometimes," she added. "It's not that bad. The light helps me sleep." Michael looked around. No mother, no one. Just wind and white silence. He wanted to call someone. A shelter, the police, anyone. But he didn't. Instead, he stayed there, sat with her. He wasn't sure how long he sat in the freezing cold, his jacket now barely shielding his arms from the wind. But Laura seemed to relax beside him, like his presence made the bench warmer. "Do you really think I'm a miracle?" he asked finally, his voice barely above the wind. Laura nodded slowly. "Mommy says, miracles are people who show up when no one else does." Michael stared ahead at the falling snow, his breath shaky. For the first time in years, he felt something crack inside the ice he'd built around himself. And so he stayed. Just a man and a little girl, waiting in the snow. Not knowing that within moments, her mother would return, and nothing in his life would ever be the same again. Ava pulled her scarf tighter around her face as the wind howled through the alley beside the soup kitchen. Snow clung to her lashes, her fingers were numb, and the small paper bag she carried was already damp from the weather. Inside it were 2 containers of warm rice porridge and a single bread roll, tonight's dinner for her and Laura. She walked quickly, every step heavy with fatigue. She had been gone longer than usual. The line at the kitchen had stretched around the block, and by the time she got inside, the volunteers were already packing up. but she had smiled, polite and patient, grateful for whatever they could give. That was the rule she lived by. Never beg, never demand, just survive. Ava was 28, once a quiet dreamer with a passion for cooking and an eye for flavor. She had worked as a line cook in a small neighborhood bistro before the pandemic forced it to close. Then came the unpaid bills, the eviction, the cold reality that even hard work could leave you homeless. Now she was just a mother doing everything she could to protect her child from a world that had no place for them. Her steps quickened as she turned onto the block where the old bus stop stood, a place she had scouted carefully. It was near a hospital, which meant patrol lights, a security camera, and a nearby shelter she sometimes used for bathrooms and blankets. The bench had a partial cover from snow and enough space for Laura to sleep if she curled up tight. But tonight, the moment Ava turned the corner, she stopped cold. There was someone there. A man sat on the bench beside Laura. He wasn't holding her, but he was close. Too close. His coat, an expensive wool one, was wrapped around her small frame. Laura was sitting upright now, her little hands bundled inside the sleeves, listening intently. He was speaking softly, telling her a story, maybe. His voice was low, warm, steady, almost like a lullaby. Ava's heart pounded. She dropped the bag, bolted forward, and reached for her daughter. "Laura!" she cried, her voice sharp with panic. She scooped the child into her arms, pulling her close, shielding her instinctively. The man stood quickly, but didn't move toward her. His hands rose immediately, palms open. "I'm not here to hurt her," he said calmly. "I was just sitting with her. She was alone, cold." Ava backed up a step, eyes scanning his face. Clean-shaven, young, serious, and unfamiliar. She didn't see malice, but she didn't trust him either. "You don't get to touch someone's child just because they look cold," she snapped, arms tightening around Laura. "I didn't touch her," he said gently. "I gave her my coat and sat with her. She told me you were coming back. I was going to wait until you did." Laura stirred in her arms, then smiled sleepily. "Mommy, he's nice. He stayed with me. He's warm like cocoa." Ava looked down at her daughter. Her skin was less pale now. She had stopped shaking. She turned back to the man, her voice still guarded. "Who are you?" "My name is Michael," he said. "I was walking by, that's all." He made no move to reclaim the coat. He just stood there, in his dress shirt, snowflakes collecting on his shoulders, hands still up. Ava studied him. His eyes were steady, not predatory, not empty, just tired, like hers. Still, she said nothing. "I can leave if you want," he offered. "But maybe you could keep the coat for her, just tonight." Ava looked at the thick wool wrapped around Laura, saw how her daughter had curled into its warmth like she belonged there. She exhaled slowly. "No," she said. "You can stay. For now, just don't try anything." "I won't," Michael nodded, his voice quiet. "I get it." He sat back down, this time at a respectful distance. Ava hesitated, then sat beside him, Laura resting in her lap between them. The snow kept falling. For a while no one spoke. Then, almost reluctantly, Ava said, "We stay here sometimes. It's safer than other places." Michael nodded, not pressing. "She said that." Ava looked at him sideways. "You really just sat with her?" He met her gaze. "No child should be that alone. Not in this kind of cold." She studied him a moment longer, then looked away, and for the first time in a long time, Ava didn't feel quite so alone on that bench. Ava sat with her arms wrapped tightly around Laura, her body forming a barrier between the child and the world. Though her voice had softened, her posture remained tense. Michael, still sitting a short distance away on the icy bench, didn't push. He simply waited, calm, quiet, present. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the sidewalk in silence. After a while, Ava glanced at him again. "Thank you," she said cautiously. "For staying." Michael gave a slight nod. No thanks needed, I just didn't want her to be alone. Ava lowered her gaze. That's kind of you, but kind usually comes with a price. I've learned that. Michael tilted his head slightly. Not always. Ava didn't answer. Her arms tightened around Laura as if shielding her from more than just the cold. Michael hesitated, then spoke again. I'm staying at a hotel nearby. It's warm, clean. You and your daughter could stay the night there, just one night. You'd be safer than here. Ava looked at him sharply. And then what? We wake up with a bill we can't pay, or worse, owe you something else? Michael didn't flinch. You wouldn't owe me anything. She let out a bitter laugh, though it was quiet. That's what they all say. Nothing is free. Michael didn't argue. Instead, he looked down at his own hands, then back at her. You're right to be careful. I respect that. He stood, brushing snow off his sleeves. There's a budget motel about 4 blocks from here. No one will bother you there. I'll take you there, pay for the night anonymously. After that, you decide what's next. Ava narrowed her eyes. Why would you do that? Michael met her gaze. Because I can, and because I want to. That answer stunned her into silence. Eventually, she nodded slowly. We'll go, just for tonight. He said nothing more, just offered a small nod and waited while she stood, lifting Laura gently in her arms, the heavy coat still wrapped around the child like a cocoon. They walked the 4 blocks in near silence. Laura, half asleep in Ava's arms, stirred only once to whisper, I like him, Mommy. He makes the air feel warm. At the motel, Michael approached the front desk and quietly handled the room arrangements, asking the clerk not to mention his name. Then he handed Ava a room key. You'll be okay here, he said. She nodded. Thank you, truly. Michael turned to leave but paused at the door. Then he felt it, a small tug at the sleeve of his coat. He looked down. Laura stood there, eyes wide, her voice a whisper. Will you come back tomorrow? I still have more of the miracle story to tell. Michael felt his chest tighten. He crouched slightly to meet her at eye level. I'll try, he said softly. I'd like to hear it. She smiled, satisfied, then ran back to her mother's side. Michael stepped outside. The snow had slowed, and the city shimmered in quiet white. He stood there for a long moment, unsure of what he was feeling. For years, everything he did had been driven by strategy, by logic, by numbers. But tonight, he had acted on something else, something he hadn't trusted in a long time. His heart. And it had led him here, to a stranger. A little girl. A miracle story not yet finished. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Michael didn't want to walk away. Michael sat in his office the next morning, a coffee going cold beside him, but his mind nowhere near quarterly reports or board meetings. He could not stop thinking about the woman and child from the night before. There had been something about Ava, something quiet but unwavering, a strength that didn't demand attention but commanded respect. She had every reason to break down, to beg, to surrender to circumstance, but she hadn't, and Michael couldn't shake the image of her sitting silently on that bench, shoulders squared against the wind, holding her daughter like a shield. Without fully understanding why, he called his assistant. I need some discreet background work, he said. Her name's Ava, mid to late 20s. Has a daughter named Laura. I think she worked in food service. No police involvement, nothing aggressive, just who she is. His assistant didn't ask questions. She never did. That afternoon, a simple file arrived in his inbox. Ava Bennett, 28, former line cook at a family-owned restaurant in Brooklyn that shut down during the pandemic. No criminal record. 1 eviction on file, currently unlisted, known to frequent soup kitchens and shelters in Midtown. She had been clean her whole life, and still, the world had swept her into the margins. Michael closed the file and leaned back, silent. The next evening, instead of returning home, he went to the downtown community kitchen, quietly funded by one of his company's charity arms. He stood near the entrance, coat collar pulled up, watching through the frosted glass window. Inside, Ava was working. She wore a borrowed apron and a too large sweater, her hair tied back loosely. She moved with practiced ease, chopping vegetables, stirring a massive pot of stew, ladling bowls with care. But it wasn't just the skill that struck him, it was the grace. She greeted each person in line with a nod or a small smile. She washed her hands between every step. She served everyone before even thinking about herself. Later, when the trays were emptied and the kitchen began to quiet, Ava sat for a moment on a crate in the back corner, sipping a lukewarm cup of tea. Michael stepped inside finally, startling her. "I'm sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to interrupt." Ava set her cup down, cautious, but not unkind. "What are you doing here?" "I support this place," he said simply. "Quietly. I wanted to see how it's being used." She raised an eyebrow. "And now you've seen." Michael hesitated, then said, "You're good at this." "I used to cook," she replied, "before all of this." "I could help," he offered. "Get you a small stipend. Make it official, nothing big but steady." Ava shook her head. "I'm not asking for charity." "It's not charity," Michael said. "It's recognizing value." She looked at him for a long time, then nodded. "Okay, I'll cook, but only if I do it on my terms." That night, she stayed late to prep for the next day. Michael lingered nearby, pretending to check his phone, but really just watching her work. It was calming somehow, like watching someone restore order in a chaotic world, one simmering pot at a time. Later, as she left through the back door, he followed at a respectful distance. She didn't go straight home. Instead, she walked 2 blocks down, turned a corner, and approached a figure slumped near the alley, an older man, hunched beneath a ripped blanket, shivering violently. Ava knelt beside him, whispered something Michael couldn't hear, then reached into her tote and pulled out a small container. Leftovers. She gently placed it in the man's hands, then, without hesitation, shrugged off her coat and wrapped it around his shoulders. Michael stopped walking. He stood there, half hidden by snow, watching her. "People shouldn't die cold," Ava murmured, adjusting the coat over the man's back. "Not even if they made mistakes." Michael didn't speak, didn't move. He just stared at her, at the care in her voice, the steadiness of her touch, the unshakable humanity she gave so freely, and in that moment for the first time in a very long time. Michael thought of his mother. She had been a nurse, tender, selfless, always the first to sit beside a patient no one else wanted to touch. She had died too young. But here, now, Michael saw that same soul reflected in a woman sitting on cold pavement beside a forgotten man. Ava didn't know she was being watched, and Michael knew he couldn't stay silent anymore, not in his heart. He had come here curious. He was now something else entirely. Moved. Winter deepened in the city, but Michael found himself stepping out into the cold more often than he ever had before. It started with one evening. Ava was packing leftover food from the community kitchen into paper containers when Michael offered, quietly, "Do you mind if I join you?" She hesitated, unsure if he was serious. "To deliver these," he added, gently lifting one of the bags. Ava studied him for a moment, then handed him a box. "You'll need gloves, and maybe some humility." From that night on, it became a ritual. Each evening after the kitchen closed, they loaded up small meals and walked together through alleys, subway entrances, and forgotten corners of the city, places where people slept in doorways and under stairwells. Many of those they served never dared enter the soup kitchen out of shame or fear, but Ava found them anyway. Michael followed. He watched as Ava knelt without hesitation in the slush and snow, placed food down with both hands, and looked the recipient in the eyes, always in the eyes. She said, "Thank you," even when she gave. It struck him deeply. It wasn't pity she gave, it was dignity. One night, as they walked down a narrow back alley, Michael finally asked, "Why do you always look at them like that? Even when they won't look back?" Ava paused. "Because someone needs to. I want them to know I see them, that they're still human." Michael didn't respond. He just nodded, a quiet respect growing heavier inside him. As the days passed, their conversations deepened. On a long walk back one night, Ava spoke of her childhood. A father who left, a mother who worked 3 jobs, a small apartment that always smelled like soup. "I've been invisible most of my life," she said simply. "I guess that's why I notice people others don't." Michael told her, hesitantly, about his own past, about losing his mother when he was 12, about how the world had told him to be tough, fast, brilliant, and how, over time, he had traded softness for strategy. He spoke of his success with a detached tone, like he was reading someone else's resume. "You built an empire," Ava said quietly, "but maybe you needed something to come home to." They shared their first true laughter not long after. In the warm, amber-lit kitchen, as they scrubbed trays and wiped counters, Michael accidentally spread water across the table. Ava yelped, tossing a dish towel at him. Laura, sitting nearby with her crayons, giggled uncontrollably. "You're terrible at cleaning," Ava said through her laugh. "Shocking, I know," he replied. "I've only ever cleaned up market crashes." That night, Laura hugged him tightly on the way out. "Good night, Mr. Snowman." "Snowman?" Michael asked, amused. Laura grinned. "Because you came with the snow, and you always bring the minty candy." He reached into his pocket and handed her a peppermint. "Then, I suppose I must live up to the name." What Michael didn't tell Ava or Laura was what he had done that morning. While reviewing property reports for the company's philanthropic branch, he'd come across a listing. A closed-down cafe space in the heart of Midtown, modest but well-built, the kind of place that could smell like fresh bread and sound like stories being shared over soup. Without fanfare or hesitation, he bought it under the foundation's name. That evening, as Ava spoke of how she missed cooking, for real, not just ladling out stew, he imagined her in that space. Her and Laura. A stove warm with purpose, a chalkboard menu written in her careful handwriting, the clatter of dishes, laughter, and second chances. He didn't say a word, but in his heart the vision was already alive, and it had a name: the hearth. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, at least it started that way. Ava had come early to the kitchen to prep for the evening meals. She was chopping carrots in the back when she heard a voice. Michael's voice. He was in the front hallway, speaking on the phone. She hadn't meant to listen, she hadn't even moved at first, but when she heard her name, her body froze. "We've finalized the purchase of the property. The hearth will open on schedule," Michael was saying. "And yes, keep the foundation's name on everything. No need to mention me. Ava still doesn't know." There was a pause. Then his assistant's voice, quieter but clear. "You sure about this? It's a significant investment." Michael replied without hesitation, "She deserves it." The knife in Ava's hand dropped to the cutting board. She felt dizzy. Michael Reynolds. The name struck her fully now. Of course she had heard it before, on headlines, in whispered admiration from volunteers, on the cover of a Forbes issue she'd seen years ago in a waiting room. The sharp-featured man with cold eyes in a billion-dollar company. And he'd been here, every day, quiet, smiling, warm, washing dishes, delivering food, lying. She stepped out of the kitchen just as Michael turned, ending the call. Their eyes met. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. His face paled. "Ava, wait." "You lied to me," she said, her voice flat but trembling. "All this time you—" "I didn't lie," he said quickly. "I just didn't tell you everything." "That's not better." He took a step closer. "I wasn't trying to trick you. I wanted to be real around you. Not the title, not the name." She shook her head. "But it's not about the name, Michael. It's about why you came, why you helped, why you stayed." He opened his mouth, but she cut him off. "You made me feel like I mattered, like I earned it. But now I realize I was just a project, another one of your quiet little donations." "No," he said, his voice rough. "You're wrong. You were never a project." "You were." "Don't," she said, stepping back. You can give me all the money in the world, but don't take my dignity. Don't pretend I need you to survive." Her words struck him harder than he expected. Before he could reply, she had turned, pulled off her apron, and walked out. Michael stood in the empty kitchen for a long time. The sounds around him, pots clinking, the low hum of the fridge, faded into static. She was gone, and it felt like something vital had been torn from him. That night he returned to his penthouse, a space filled with everything money could buy: tall windows, designer furniture, an unobstructed skyline view, but it had never felt emptier. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was suffocating. For the next 3 days, Michael drifted through work like a ghost. His staff noticed. Emails went unanswered. He canceled meetings. He stopped returning calls. And every morning he found himself walking the same route, past the bus stop where they'd first met, hoping to see a small figure in a too-big coat. She was never there. He stopped by the kitchen, too, once, just to stand outside, just to listen. There was no laughter, no warmth, no Ava. He tried to reason with himself. This had been about helping, about kindness, about the hearth. But deep down, he knew that wasn't the truth anymore. He hadn't stayed all those nights for charity. He hadn't watched her from the shadows just to feel useful. He had stayed because something in her steadiness had anchored him. He had fallen in love without even realizing it, and now that she was gone, everything that had once given his life shape, deals, mergers, numbers, felt like noise. One evening, he loaded a bag of leftover meals himself and walked the route they used to take together, down familiar alleys, around frozen corners, past the steps of the old church where Ava used to leave extra blankets. He found no one. At the last stop, the quietest street of all, he stood alone beneath a flickering lamppost. The wind cut through his coat. Snow danced in the light like dust. He closed his eyes, and he remembered her voice. "I don't need to be saved. I need to feel like a person." Michael opened his eyes slowly, and then, aloud to no one, he whispered, "I didn't save her." He looked up at the sky, snow catching in his lashes. "She saved me." It wasn't her need that had changed him. It was her refusal to be defined by it, her quiet pride, her small, steady acts of care. He had fallen in love not because she needed him, but because she didn't. And he needed her. He needed the sound of her laughter echoing off kitchen walls. He needed Laura's peppermint sticky hugs. He needed the way Ava looked at people, like they still mattered, even when the world had forgotten them. Michael Reynolds, the man who had everything, now knew what it meant to miss something so deeply it echoed. The kitchen buzzed with the soft clatter of pots and the low murmur of voices as volunteers prepared the evening's final round of meals. But when Michael walked through the door that night, everything seemed to still. He didn't speak. He didn't ask for permission. He simply walked to the far end of the room and sat down on the same stool where he used to try dishes beside her. The air smelled of ginger and broth. It reminded him of warmth, of the kind that couldn't be bought. Around him, no one said anything. They knew who he was now, but tonight, it didn't matter. Tonight he was just a man waiting for someone. Minutes passed. Then Ava appeared. She stepped out from the back, holding a steaming bowl in her hands. Her hair was pulled back loosely, a few strands falling around her face. She walked slowly, her eyes fixed on him, unreadable. She said nothing as she placed the bowl on the counter in front of him. Not a greeting, not a smile. Just, "Eat." "I added extra ginger. It's cold out." Michael looked up, locking eyes with her. He reached for the spoon, then paused. "I don't know when it started," he said quietly. "Maybe it was the night I saw you give your last bowl of soup to someone who couldn't meet your eyes. Or maybe it was when you laughed, even though I knew you hadn't slept. But somewhere along the way I stopped coming here to help." He held her gaze. "I came here because I needed you." Ava said nothing, but her lips trembled slightly and she blinked more than once. Michael continued, voice steady now. I don't know how to want things I can't control, but I know this. Nothing else I eat tastes right anymore unless it's made by you. She looked away, then back at him. Then don't leave again, she said softly. I never needed someone to bring me miracles. I just needed someone who'd stay, even when it's hard, especially. Then Michael stood slowly, stepping closer, his voice lowering. I'm staying, not out of guilt, not to save anyone, but because you are the one thing I didn't know I was missing. He reached out gently, resting his hand on the edge of the counter between them. For the first time in my life, he said, I have something to come home to. Ava said nothing. Instead, she placed her hand over his. Their fingers intertwined. No more explanations were needed. Behind them, Laura peeked from the doorway, a grin spreading across her face as she whispered, Told you he'd come back, Mommy. The soup sat forgotten on the counter, steam rising and soft curls between them. But in that moment, neither one of them needed food to feel full. 1 year later, the snow returned to New York, but this time it felt softer, kinder. At the edge of the city, nestled between old buildings and new beginnings, stood Hearth Village, a community unlike any other. Built from restored brick and renovated hope, it offered more than just shelter. It offered a fresh start. Inside its walls, there was a bustling community kitchen, a classroom for vocational training, shared gardens, a reading nook, and a playground where children's laughter echoed like bells. And at the heart of it all stood Ava, now the head chef and program director. She moved through the kitchen with the same grace she once did in borrowed aprons, only now with staff behind her and a vision before her. Laura, now 5, wore a bright yellow sash labeled Ambassador of Smiles. She had taken the title very seriously, greeting every visitor, volunteer, and resident with her signature giggle and a handful of peppermints. On opening day, the small community hall overflowed with people, donors, partners, former shelter residents, and families who had once called the streets home. Michael stepped onto the stage to speak, modestly dressed in a wool coat and open collar, eyes scanning the crowd. Just as he reached for the microphone, a blur of motion zipped past the side curtain. "Wait!" Laura shouted, climbing the steps to join him, holding a toy microphone she had insisted on bringing. The crowd chuckled. Laura turned to the audience, standing proudly at Michael's side. "This is my dad," she said, beaming. "He's not a miracle. Everyone says he is, but he's not." Michael blinked, amused and slightly stunned. She continued, voice clear and strong for someone so small. "He's my dad now. I wished for him. A long time ago, and he came." The room filled with soft laughter, applause, and more than a few tears. From the side of the stage, Ava watched, one hand over her mouth, the other pressed gently to her chest. Her eyes glistened in the soft light. Michael turned to Laura, knelt beside her, and whispered, "You know what, kiddo? I think I wished for you too." The rest of the evening passed in joy and celebration. People danced, stories were shared, hands were held. And when the night grew quiet, the three of them returned to the small cottage near the hearth's garden, a home filled with wooden floors, bookshelves, spice jars, and the warmth of something earned, not given. It was Christmas Eve. In the kitchen, Ava sliced a spiced apple cake, while Laura knelt on the windowsill, watching the sky for lanterns. Michael stood nearby, mug in hand, watching them with a gaze that held more than gratitude. It held peace. Outside, paper lanterns floated upward from Hearth Village, carrying wishes scribbled in childlike handwriting and crooked cursive. Laura called out, "I think that one's mine. I wished for more hugs." Michael wrapped his arms around both her and Ava, pulling them close as the warmth from the oven, the scent of cinnamon swirled around him. Ava leaned her head against his shoulder and whispered, "We used to wish for a miracle." Michael smiled gently, eyes on the sky. "But it turns out," he said, tightening his embrace, "you were the miracle I never dared to ask for." And beneath a sky filled with lanterns, laughter, and soft snow, Their little family stood wrapped in light, not just from the season, but from something deeper. Love, home, and a future finally built on both. If this story touched your heart, you're not alone. Sometimes the most powerful miracles are not grand or loud. They're quiet acts of kindness, a bowl of soup, a coat shared in the cold, a hand held in silence. They're found in the people who choose to stay and love without needing to rescue. At Soul-Stirring Stories, we believe in the beauty of real moments, of hope born from hardship, and of second chances that change lives. If you believe in those things too, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. Join our community of hearts that still believe in goodness, in healing, and in stories that remind us of who we truly are, because sometimes all it takes is one story to stir your soul. Subscribe now and let the next story find its way to you.